Ophelia, who lost her mind for the sake of love and eventually took her own life, appears excessively elegant despite this being a scene of death. By juxtaposing the inevitable end of drowning with vibrant colors and a noble posture, the painter creates a mesmerizing atmosphere, as if inviting us to be enchanted by this death rather than mourn it. Ophelia has opened her hands in a gesture of total surrender. In one hand, she holds the flowers she so carefully gathered. Yet, just as those freshly plucked blossoms are destined to wither, this beautiful body will soon share the same fate in the depths of the water. As her heavy dress meets the river, one can almost feel the cumbersome texture of the fabric. While this voluminous gown manages to keep her afloat for a moment, as it grows heavy with water, it pulls Ophelia gently yet resolutely down into the deep. So, who was Ophelia in love with? And why did this love drive her to the brink of madness? The person we must focus on is the protagonist himself, a walking personification of paranoia, Prince Hamlet. When Prince Hamlet's father, King Hamlet, dies under suspicious circumstances, the king's brother takes the throne and, without wasting any time, marries the Queen Hamlet's mother. This situation plunges Hamlet into deep suspicion. He begins to believe that his uncle murdered his father for the throne and seduced his mother. One night, Hamlet encounters his father's ghost and hears the truth from the spirit's own lips. The killer is his uncle, and he must be avenged. From this point on, Hamlet has only one goal: to take revenge for his father. During this time, a romance is blooming between Ophelia and Hamlet. However, Ophelia's father and brother strongly oppose this relationship, arguing that Hamlet's intentions are not sincere and that he is merely trifling with her affections. Hamlet, meanwhile, is stuck in a quagmire of thought. How will he avenge his father? How will he stomach his mother's hasty marriage? And is the ghost he saw truly his father, or just a figment of his imagination? Losing his mental balance among these questions, Hamlet begins to feign madness to deceive those around him. One day he enters Ophelia's room without saying a word and stares at her for a long time, terrifying the young woman. When Ophelia tells her father about this strange behavior, he completely misunderstands the situation. The man who once doubted Hamlet's sincerity now believes the prince is consumed by a hopeless black love and has gone mad with passion. The famous letter Hamlet wrote to Ophelia stands as a testament to this love. Doubt thou the stars are fire, doubt that the sun doth move, doubt truth to be a liar, but never doubt I love. Yet, this complex state of mind does not stem from love, but from the darkness within his own soul. In fact, looking at his subsequent behavior, he does not act like a man in love at all. He becomes incredibly cruel toward Ophelia, mocks her, and at one point, even tells her to her face that he never loved her. The truth is, Hamlet is wandering on the borders of insanity. He longs to take revenge on his uncle, yet he can never bring himself to take action. His mind is so occupied with the moral consequences of the murder he is to commit that this indecision and existential anxiety give birth to the most famous lines in literary history. To be or not to be, that is the question. Whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles. This passage summarizes Hamlet's restless mind, full of dead ends, in its barest form. Ultimately, we see a character who is caught in the middle in every sense. Hamlet is indecisive not only about whether to take revenge, but at every level of existence. On one hand, there is the desire to cling to life. On the other, those dark sentences whispering that he has given up on this world. The living being called human both fascinates and unnerves Hamlet. It is difficult to define him as a good person, yet the human dilemmas he experiences are so profound that it becomes equally difficult to hate him. We can see this depth clearly in Hamlet's stance toward the concept of death. One day he encounters a man in a graveyard. The person in the grave being dug is no stranger to Hamlet. It is Yorick, the court jester who entertained him during his childhood. Hamlet takes Yorick's skull from the gravedigger's hand, and as he gazes into those empty eye sockets, he realizes a staggering truth. From that once vibrant body that radiated joy, nothing remains but this gruesome piece of bone. The fact that death is so concrete and irreversible fills him with dread. Yet, despite the ruthlessness of death, he cannot help but remain mesmerized by the miracle called a human being. What a piece of work is a man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action how like an angel, in apprehension how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals. Although Hamlet marvels at human nature, he cannot quite reconcile the idea of death in his mind. Ultimately, the place this noble work will return to is a skull, just like Yorick. As we have said from the beginning, Hamlet is someone caught in between, and throughout the story, we remain in this purgatory with him. One part of us justifies him. Imagine your uncle kills your father, sits on your throne, and on top of that, marries your mother. Who could remain calm in such a situation? Yet, our other side keeps a distance from Hamlet's dark nature that destroys everything around him. In the end, we are left with the same dilemma. Who is this Hamlet? A loyal son who wants to avenge his father, or a mad prince who ruins everyone he touches? What he does to Ophelia, in particular, is a total disaster. Hamlet treats the young woman so poorly that he becomes the primary cause of her descent into madness, with his unstable behavior. However, the true breaking point is a localized, unfortunate event that occurs during an argument with his mother. Hearing sounds from behind a tapestry while arguing, Hamlet assumes his uncle is hiding there and strikes with his sword through the partition without looking. Yet the person behind the curtain is not his uncle. It is Ophelia's father. Hamlet has unwittingly killed the father of the woman he loves. From this moment on, the thread snaps for Ophelia. She is now left with two searing truths. Hamlet is not in love with her, and this prince is her father's killer. Ophelia cannot bear this burden, and her mind slowly sinks into darkness. She begins to wander about, humming meaningless songs and handing out flowers to people. It is now obvious to everyone that she has lost her mind. But the real tragedy is that no one extends a helping hand to this lonely girl. Ophelia finally climbs a willow tree by the river. When the branch she steps on breaks, she finds herself in the water. Despite knowing she will drown in a moment, she goes to her death singing songs with a sense of total surrender. Therefore, it is more accurate to see Ophelia not as someone who died unfortunately by accident, but as someone who embraced this end knowingly. Throughout the story, all characters burn within this tragedy in some way. However, the only one who burns lonely and silently is Ophelia. The reason Ophelia is so beloved in art history is not just her dramatic end, but also the enchanting beauty she possesses. Many painters have brought this sorrowful scene to the canvas, but one among them stands out far beyond the others with his portrayal of Ophelia. John Everett Millais was one of the founding members of the group called the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood. For this group, which loved to depict nature, romanticism, and tragic female characters, Ophelia was a perfect fit. The painter's choice of model was also quite meaningful in this work. Millais used a 19-year-old girl named Elizabeth Siddal as the model for Ophelia. Although Siddal did not quite fit the general perception of beauty at the time, she possessed a unique, enchanting beauty with her childlike and innocent appearance. Instead of putting Siddal into a real river to pose, the painter filled a bathtub in the studio with water, while Millais meticulously examined and transferred the appearance of hair and clothes in contact with water to his work. He encountered a major problem. Siddal was staying in the tub for hours, and the candles placed under the tub to keep the water warm went out after a while. Even though the water was ice cold, Siddal continued to pose and eventually fell seriously ill. Siddal's surrender while continuing to model in that freezing water was likened to Ophelia's acceptance of death instead of struggling to escape the river. Moreover, the lives of these two women bore a tragic resemblance. Siddal fell into a deep depression after a miscarriage and eventually died at the age of 32 from an opium overdose. Just like the question of whether Ophelia died as a result of an accident or suicide, the veil of suspicion over Siddal's death was never lifted. The general opinion is that both did not pass away due to an unfortunate accident, but consciously ended their lives. Although Ophelia and Hamlet are essentially melancholic souls, their ways of experiencing madness are diametrically opposed. Hamlet destroys his surroundings with his madness, whereas Ophelia only harms herself. Throughout the story, Hamlet fears the unknown, what happens after death, and the burden of revenge. Ophelia, on the other hand, fears not the unknown, but what she already knows, the falsity of Hamlet's love, and the fact that those around her are using her. It is this painful realization that drives her to death. Hamlet also occasionally desires to break away from this life, and pours that dark conflict in his mind into these words. When he himself might his quietus make, with a bare bodkin, who would fardels bear, to grunt and sweat under a weary life, but that the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveler returns. Moreover, Hamlet was perfectly aware of Ophelia's state of mind, yet he did nothing to help her. These words of his regarding love prove that he was, in fact, conscious of everything. For women fear too much, even as they love, and women's fear and love hold quantity, in neither aught nor in extremity. Hamlet knew full well the magnitude of Ophelia's love for him, and the fear that this love instilled in her. Yet, he was indifferent to her. In truth, Ophelia suffered nothing but harm from the male figures in her life throughout the story. Hamlet deceived her by playing the part of a lover. Her father used her as a tool to gather information, and her brother abandoned her to her own troubles as he went far away. Even when her madness was evident to all, as she wandered about, humming songs and distributing flowers, no one reached out to help her. The selection of flowers Ophelia distributed was actually brilliant and symbolic, to a degree one wouldn't expect from the insane. She gave fennel to Hamlet's uncle, as fennel represents flatteria, direct reference to the uncle's arrogance in murdering his own brother to seize the throne. To Hamlet's mother, she presented rue, which symbolizes adultery and infidelity. He also set aside a piece of rue for herself, in honor of its other meaning, repentance. At one point, she saw a daisy on the ground and considered picking it up to hand out, but she stopped herself, because the daisy represents innocence, and in Ophelia's words, there is no innocence here. Rue, this distribution of plants, Ophelia criticized those around her with feminine grace, but immense sharpness. This was a reproachful message left for those remaining before she ended her life. To return to Ophelia's end, it is obvious that this death was a conscious choice, rather than an unfortunate accident. Perhaps she had not calculated that the tree branch would break, but the moment she made contact with the water, she embraced death with total surrender, showing not even the slightest struggle to save herself. No matter how much this scene is romanticized in works of art, it is in essence a pure tragedy, the silent vanishing of a woman who fell for a man who did not love her, who was used as a tool by those around her, who lost her father, and who ultimately descended into madness all alone.